We are a worshiping community. Oh, I love the sounds of that. Let me tell you a quick story that the way I understand it. And of course, as you know, I want to. I don't know every story, but I've heard the folklore stories as time goes on. But think of a small group of people in Southern California gathering on Sunday nights because they were so desperately dry in their Christian journey. They were been pilgrims. They had been faithful. They had been serving God, but just had come to a place that I think even they referenced themselves as some burned out Pharisees. They started to gather and they started singing simple love songs to Jesus. That's all they did. They weren't trying to put on a show. They weren't having a worship service. They were simply singing their hearts to Jesus. And what they realized is Jesus began to meet with them on those Sunday nights. He began to show up. They would cry. They would sing. They would sing to him, not about him. That group had no idea that it was giving birth to something that would penetrate so deeply into the body of Christ around the world today in the 21st century. I think worship in the Vineyard can never be celebrated enough. We're never going to go overboard with worship. Worship and that this whole thing of intimacy, in that day, and as Vineyard music developed and the worship that the style of the Vineyard, it became something that was out ahead, maybe a little distance of what was going on. And we began to share that around through Vineyard music and CDs and all of that. But that is something that was so wonderful that we shared that with the rest of the body of Christ. Well, today this whole thing goes around the world. I've been in countries. True story. I was in a country where they were singing. I asked them if they'd ever heard of the Vineyard, and they said no, they had never heard of the Vineyard. But when I was in their worship service on Sunday morning, they sang 3 Vineyard worship songs. But they didn't know it. They weren't doing it because it was Vineyard. It had just come to, and these were songs that were translated into another language. So Vineyard has made a contribution to this. But what are some of the distinctions even of Vineyard worship? Let me tell you one of the big ones. It sings to Jesus. It worships God. It's not singing about him. It's not telling the history of God. It is singing in the first person, in the present moment. I love you. I lift my hands up. And that worship just has set a course for us in the Vineyard. We will never walk away from our roots, just our roots in the Vineyard. Worship. And today, with all the other groups doing so much to make contributions, we're one of many. We celebrate that. That's part of who we are. So as we always say, where I've been pastoring a long time, it's time to worship hard.